Welcome to Outside of the Classroom. Education is important, but not that bullshit, abstract, and theoretical education. You want useful, relevant, and actionable lessons that will help you succeed in life. So that's what we do. It's your boy Pham, your host, and now let's hack your education together. Welcome to Outside of the Classroom. Today on the show, we have stand-up comedian Sierra Katow. Sierra, welcome to the show.
Hey, hi. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, well, Sierra, I have something to tell you.
Uh-huh.
You have inspired me to get into comedy.
Oh, yay. No way. That's awesome. That's the goal.
Well, the thing is, I've always loved comedy, but I've never actually tried it out. And when I discovered you on the Laugh Factory, and I saw how you're doing it, and I knew more about you, and I was like, wow, it gave me a new perspective on like how anyone can do it. So I recently wrote some really bad jokes, and maybe one day I'll get to your level.
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm still not at quite the level that I think you would want to be at, but I think, yeah, for sure anyone can do it. I started pretty much kind of on a whim. You know, it's sort of like a lot of people, I think of funny things. Some people are class clowns. I wasn't really the class clown or anything like that, but you know, even if you're not like outwardly funny all the time in regular life or whatever you call it, I think people can always give stand-up comedy a try because it's, you know, like something you prepare for and work towards.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming that most stand-up comedians are funny off the stage. Is that not true, or is that
Yeah, I mean, I think you get to that point. Like, I would say I've gotten, you know, hopefully funnier off stage since I started. But, you know, I think it's important to know that it's not necessarily like you don't have to be like the funniest guy in the room all the time to then start doing comedy. You know, it can be something that comes later or that you want to work towards, right? So
so it's totally different. Like for example, the class clown wouldn't always be a great stand-up comedian, for example, right?
I mean, I'd say like they could totally be a lot of them are great stand-up comedians, but it's not necessarily like, you know, an exclusive thing. As far as like, you don't have to be the class clown, I think, to want to pursue comedy or to pursue comedy. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you're living proof of that. So
Yeah.
I'm just very curious, when did you get into stand-up? Was it like, you said 4 years, right?
Yeah. So when I was like 16, I guess, is when I first started. And so I was in high school and I grew up basically in like outside of LA. So there are a lot of opportunities to perform around there, but like every city has like a comedy club, hopefully, or some sort of like open mic scene, depending on where you live, right? So I just went to like some open mics that were at the comedy clubs around there. There's like the Laugh Factory and the Flappers Comedy Club that's out there. So yeah, and then like I think I was really attracted to the fact that like you aren't really like pre-screened. It's very like do it yourself, you know. Like no one's gonna stop you from signing up for an open mic because it's open. And so then I kind of just liked that kind of concept and the fact that you can kind of just work towards it yourself and like figure stuff out and then go up on stage, try it out. And if you totally don't do well, like it's mainly just like strangers in the audience who you'll never see again. So that's what's really good about it in the end.
It's just crazy because like when I was 16, you know, my biggest fear was like asking a girl out. But to go on stage and perform really like bad jokes is just like a whole nother level to me. But
well, I mean, at least, you know, if you ask a girl out, I mean, I see why that's a big deal because like then you might see her later. You know what I mean? Depending on how it goes. Strangers you don't have to see later. So like if you totally bomb, then who knows, right? They'll probably not remember you.
I mean, at 16, like, did it feel weird trying to do stand-up, or was everyone like in LA like into the comedy, acting, performance?
Oh, I see. I mean, yeah, there's like a ton of people obviously out there into that. I think, yeah, I was a little bit young, being like a young girl, being, you know, Asian American. I think like that was pretty like different and probably a little bit, but I didn't like think about it that much actually initially. Like it was just sort of like, oh, I want to do this, and then like you show up and like sure you're kind of the only one there that's like this one or something. But like, you know, hopefully that doesn't phase you. And like, you know, there's certain things that like I've met as I've become a comedian and like done more comedy and been more integrated with the scene that definitely like it's definitely a total different experience as someone who isn't quite like, you know, doesn't look like the sort of typical comedian and this and that. So being young and going into that, like, yeah, I was a little scary, I think, but like, I don't know. I guess it was also kind of like low pressure, because it wasn't as if you were like, supporting yourself or anything. Like I was like in high school, so I was like, well,
Yeah.
if this doesn't work out, like I'll just keep doing high school.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah, most definitely, nothing to lose.
right.
Well, tell me more about your first performance. Was that open mic? How was that like for you?
Yeah, so it was an open mic. It was about 3 minutes long, which is like kind of the typical open mic length. And I had prepared material for it. So I prepared like 2 jokes, probably like one, slightly longer jokes, I guess, if you categorize, depending on how you rank that. But yeah, and like one was on like how I was trying to like stifle a fart in like during like taking a math test. That was like one premise, and then the other, and that was a real story, so I felt very authentic. And then the other one was a made up story. So then that's kind of when I learned that actually the fart story worked, because I feel like that was like again the authentic story and like the one that was coming from the heart. And then the other one like didn't really work as well because I kind of made it up. It was about like walking around with like or was it me? I can't remember what it was. Either like some girl, I think seeing some girl like with her dress accidentally like tucked into her underpants or something. And it was like, oh no, how do you approach that? How do you like tell her like to untuck it, right? Because it's awful. Anyway, that one didn't go over so well, but the first one did. So it was fine, I felt like I liked the laughter, and I liked kind of the like immediate connection with the people in the audience that you get with like, again, complete strangers, but like there's sort of this like trust founded when like you can make someone laugh. So I really liked that connection, and then I just continued from there kind of. I didn't like dive right in and start doing it every day, but like for sure it was really the start, I think.
That's awesome. But I'm just very curious, like, what was your thought process going? Like, at what point did you say, I'm gonna start writing jokes and performing on open mic? Like, did you see someone like perform, or how?
So like the weird thing, so I guess when I was younger is like I watched like Last Comic Standing when I was younger, so that was really cool. But it didn't like register with me, like watching stand-up comedy. Like you see it every so often, you see like big people, like big time comedians perform stand-up. So I think I kind of thought in my head like, oh, it's like actors who become famous and then they want to talk for an hour. And like I didn't understand that it was like a thing that like you could also do and work towards,
Yeah.
So I think it wasn't until I also didn't have like cable for a while. So when I got cable in like high school, or I don't know when that was, I just like went ham on Comedy Central. Like that was just I just watched everything possible on that, and like all the stand-up specials, all the half-hour specials. And so like that was sort of like when I started to understand what stand-up comedy was. And then kind of when I looked into like open mics, I think it was just like kind of a quick turn in which it was like going from watching to being like maybe doing, and I think that is how hopefully like a lot of people do start. Like some people, sit on it, marinate, like have been watching it since they're a little bit like very like unsure whether they should do it or not, and then finally they try. I think for me there was like a very short period of time before like realizing it was a thing and then wanting to do it.
Wow, that's awesome.
But I mean, like I think a lot of people are like that too. I think there's like, it is sort of such a like accessible like thing, comedy and stand-up comedy, because it's so personal that I think that like if people really feel compelled by watching it and feel compelled then to like think of things that they would say if they were up there, like that's a really good sign that like they should try it.
Awesome. And so, okay, so you were inspired by Comedy Central, and then you did the open mic. I guess like I know you've been doing it for 4 years, but I would love to, before we go into like the creative process and like being funnier, I would love to dive in more into your journey. Like, how did that like next step go? Like after that first performance?
Yeah, so like because of that performance, like I got booked on like another show, and it's sort of like the way a lot of these open mics work is you kind of go to them and you meet people, and then hopefully get booked on other shows and this and that, and it kind of just happens, right?
You got booked at 16?
I mean, yeah, but everybody gets booked at like whenever they're trying to perform in the beginning for the most part. I mean, like it's definitely not like a big deal. It was like a small show with like 10 comedians. Everyone's pretty new.
What does it mean by getting booked?
Booked, sorry, yeah, getting booked, it's like you're not paid typically. By booked, I just mean like you're on a show that's scheduled with your name on it. You know what I mean? Like rather than like an open mic where you show up and who knows who's going to perform.
That's kind of a big deal.
So yeah, I mean, it was cool. And all my family came, my parents and my sister, and it was fun. But yeah, for sure, like from then on, like I didn't really start doing it that often, which like you're supposed to do it every day. I didn't know, I was out of the loop. I wasn't like talking to the like 30-year-old men there, like like, hey, how do I do comedy? But I think like for sure from that point, it was sort of like, okay, I kind of understood that there were like a certain number of like comedy clubs that were in LA, and like the goal would kind of be to be able to perform at like all of them, right? And like still I haven't gotten to be like a regular at like many of these, of course, but it is sort of like the goal you work towards is just like how, like I think, and that's kind of the goal that gets hatched early on, like that is like, how can I get myself in a position so that I can perform a lot, so I can get better. And in order to get better, you do have to work at it. So you kind of have to go to all these open mics and stuff. So I kind of started to going to like open mics that I found online and like ones that I'd heard of through other comedians. And I couldn't drive for a while, so like my mom would drop me off sometimes. Until I could get my license, which was good. So it was slow in the beginning, but I think it was like because I liked it so much and I knew it was something that I could do for a while, like I didn't feel like super rushed about it, but I also was like very interested in just trying to like learn as much about it as possible and just like continue to go to these mics and get better.
But for these comedy clubs and open mics, aren't they usually at bars where you have to be over 21?
Yeah, I forgot about that. So I like just turned 21. And like it's a big deal because now I can actually like go in a lot of these places without getting in trouble.
Your ID.
Without like trying to be like, hey, what's up, distract and rock it. No, but I mean like for the most part, a lot of them are like 18 plus, so that was fine for a while. When I was under 18, obviously like there were still some clubs that like were not necessarily, they were kind of like 18 recommended just because of material, but they serve food, so it's not a big deal like alcohol wise. But like things like the Comedy Store, like 21 plus, very strict. So I would have to wait on the sidewalk. Like there's a patio. Wow. And I would have to wait like on the sidewalk near the street instead because I couldn't even be in the patio because the patio was serving alcohol. So then they would like come and grab me. I would go in and do my set and then I would have to leave immediately after.
Really? Oh my gosh.
That was like pretty, I mean, I haven't been back in LA since I turned 21. So it'll be interesting to see how it is without that. But like a lot of the problem with that, I guess, is like as a comedian, you're not just performing, you want to watch too, you want to like, especially for your own show, like get a feel for the room beforehand. So you kind of know, or like listen to the other like comedians and then you can make like jokes about them if it ever comes up, you know what I mean? Like you want to kind of be on the same page as the audience. And that's like huge because you just want to make that connection. So like having to wait outside and stuff is like a big hindrance in the sense of like you don't really know what you're getting into the minute you get pulled into the room. I would also always be like out of breath and like jogging in, like all the time running up the stairs, like I'm here.
I mean that just shows you like your drive and dedication to like performing and trying to like get stage time, right?
I mean, I think it's like a lot of people, a lot of comedians I would talk to actually, like some of them did start before 21, of course. But like, I think only recently some of these clubs started getting more strict, I guess, on their policy. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like, it's a trade-off. It's like, it is dedication in the sense that like I had to wait outside and all that crap. But like, I definitely think that at the same time, like I had the luxury of also like not having a real job. So I was like, just like, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a trade-off starting young, right?
I'm just very curious because very few people would actually wait outside and have to go. If that was ever like an option, they would just like opt out of not even performing. I guess like what was that intrinsic motivation that you had to do stand up so much? Did you do it with somebody? Was it just like you wanted to get stage time as much as possible?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like I didn't really do it with anyone, so I didn't have that accountability. But it was like, I think it's just like also the general stand up like vibe, I feel like, is very dedicated. Like, you know, you have a lot of people who have been doing it for so long and claim that they've been on the grind for so long that you kind of feel like, oh, then I have no excuse, like I need to
Oh,
also
interesting.
kind of push myself here and like can't complain about like anything. It's kind of because a lot of people obviously have been working it for a long time, and some people never get their break, whatever you want to call it. And like, but people just like love doing stand-up comedy for it, right? So it's like, as long as you can get up there on stage, like that's the reward, and that's what's awesome about it. And then like, everything else that comes with it, like, sure, it sucks you're not getting paid, or like you had to like go and drive for a long time, or you had to wait outside or whatever, but like it's really just like the payoff is like being able to be on stage, and like, yeah, it's a crazy profession to be able to just like, have a bunch of people who are complete strangers like listen to you for however long, like,
That's
and
awesome.
so I think that's like the big payoff and the big reward. And like all the other like stuff that's like not as pleasant that comes with it, like, you kind of don't feel too bad about it because you're kind of doing what you want to do.
Yeah. So when you were like 18 and 19, like how often did you go to these open mics or comedy clubs? Like
Yeah.
once a week?
Yeah, I mean, multiple times a week, I would say.
Wow.
I would go back, I wouldn't, when I was in school, it was definitely like, it couldn't be maybe like once every 2 weeks, right? Or so, or maybe more. But
Mhm.
like when I was back in LA during the summer, like it would just be like as much as possible, just because I also kind of had the sense of like, oh, I'm back here in LA during the summer in between school. I had the time to do this. Like, I would be working during the day, but I would have, nights off so I could do as much as I could. So, and people who are really, really pushing stand-up comedy for like full time will do like multiple shows per night. So it's like even going up like 3 or 4 times for 5 times a night. So
That's
that was
insane.
sort of like the bar that you set, or the bar that I set was like, okay, there are like real people doing this like 4 or 5 times a night. So like I need to at least try to do it like every night, It's like, I mean, I was like working, so it was definitely like a little exhausting, but you kind of, there is this like stand-up comedy work ethic that kind of like makes you feel like you need to really step your game up.
Uh-huh. Well,
Yeah.
that's just incredible. But Sierra, like when I think of you, I see like a triple threat because for those who don't know, you're also a coder, an artist, and a comedian, which is like absolutely insane because your artwork is like phenomenal. I'm not very technical in coding, but I'm sure if you're studying at Harvard, like you must be good. So you're like so multi-talented. Like, and when I asked you on Twitter, what you wanted to do, like I guess after college, you said you wanted to become a performer full time. Have you ever considered just like not dropping everything, but just like totally putting more focus on like being that full time performer?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think about that a lot. I mean, it's definitely like so hard to be like you do have to choose something, I think, in the end. You know what I mean? Like I've had this time kind of to be in college and like mull over what do I want to do, and like I can kind of just like do whatever because I'm not really like trying to support myself right now. You know what I mean? But I think like, yeah, for sure. Like I've focused a lot on comedy most recently. So I'd say I've let the sort of coding and the art fall by the wayside a little bit. I've always loved, drawing and painting and all that, illustration and comics. I think for right now, I've not done it as much, I guess, because it does take a lot of time, and I haven't really like had the space to do it. But it'd always be a part of like what I like to do for fun, and like however it can be incorporated into comedy as well. Like I love doing like comics and gags and stuff with jokes, and visual jokes to me are like so important. So yeah, I mean, I think it really enhances comedy as well. And like I haven't really figured out a way to incorporate like how I'm studying computer science here and like how I want to do comedy, but yeah, I mean, like I've also done like coding for a long time. It's a part of my life. I think that like, I have forgone a lot of things that like a lot of the other computer science students here have done. So like compared to the computer science students that I know here, like I'm definitely not at their level at all. I mean, they definitely like are taking it very like all the way. They're working at Google and all like Facebook, all the really great places that are available, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I just know that like if I want to do comedy, like I probably have to work like a slightly less, I mean, a slightly different job. I think that's only because, for one, I want to leave time for comedy, but also like I want to be in Los Angeles, and I think like most of the sort of like tech jobs, if I were to do that, would be in San Francisco and Silicon Valley kind of area. So there are like sacrifices I think that like I am already trying to make in order to do comedy more. And inevitably like it would be hard to keep up all the things that like I would want to do, I guess, or like anybody would want to do, right? So so I guess like I definitely feel like comedy takes a priority right now, but I also realize that like I mean I don't know, it doesn't mean to stop doing everything or to only like put yourself in like this narrow sort of vertical motion and only follow one pursuit, because I've just noticed like having done a bunch of some things in art or something, like it's really helped with like my comedy. And like I think down the road like hopefully I could use that as part of my comedy in some way, whatever that means, right? So I think it's just like it'll be interesting to see how these other things factor in.
Yeah, I was thinking about asking you, like, how does art influence your comedy? Like, could you talk about like how art is funny, or like how coding is funny? You can probably be like a startup comedian. You know what I mean? Is that what you mean by when you say art influences your comedy?
I think so. I think it's not necessarily like I don't talk about the experiences as much as an artist or as like a computer scientist, I guess, or whatever you want to call either of those things. I think like definitely people have brought that up before, like, oh, do you have any like cool like funny like nerdy code jokes? It's like I don't know, I don't really think about that, but yeah, no, I think that like by the comedy I just feel like style wise or like any sort of thing, like I think there's a lot to be said about like I like comedy performance in the sense of like stand-up comedy, but stand-up comedy and writing for stand-up comedy is very different from like writing just like written humor in like a humor piece, or like it's very different from like writing a comic and like illustrating something that's funny that has like a one-line caption like a New Yorker cartoon or something like that, right? So they're all very different forms of comedy, but I think they all also feed into each other. So I think being able to kind of like make people laugh in different ways is very important. And so I guess that's kind of the way in which like I guess you can argue I influenced by like the other types of things that like I have done, but like it's definitely up in the air.
I want to go back. You mentioned about writing comedy and how it's very different from like writing comics or writing like like a sitcom or something. I want to go more into like how do you create your material? Like, do you? I saw like an Asian joke you had once, and then like I think you had one about being young. I'm not sure if maybe someone else, but
maybe I don't know. I don't know if I'm that in line. Yeah.
I guess like for those who are new to stand-up comedy, like I know a little bit, but like for those who I guess want to start new material, I guess how would you go about writing new material?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great question, because like that's kind of always what people ask about. I think also, which is interesting, is we have at the school we have this like stand-up comedy student group, and
sweet.
The new members always like come in asking that question. So it's like a very good, very good current question. I think what I tend to tell them is like, I'm still figuring it out myself. I'd love to be able to just like write new comedy all the time, but it's very hard. I think like the main thing that helps me a lot is like carrying around a notebook or your phone and just like writing down anything that comes to mind that's funny. Like people think of funny things a lot, hopefully, or funny things happen, or you see something funny that happened, right? But like it's hard to remember what exactly happened, so that's why it's so important to write it down. And that honestly can be the only difference between like you now and you as a comedian, right?
Interesting.
It's like it did make a big difference when I was starting out, I think. And like almost every comedian has like their notebook. Like if you go into an open mic, you'll see all the comedians have their little like moleskins or whatever, and they're just like furiously writing in it. So then you can write down stuff and then flesh out jokes later. So you're not necessarily like writing down your entire set like as you see it happen before you, but you're like writing premises and then later revisit. And like especially for stand-up comedy, like this is kind of why it's so different, I think, from other types of things, is that stand-up comedy is just so personal. Like you have to be on stage like as a person, and then the audience has to be like, I want to listen to this person, right? Like other than the fact that they're like up there right now, I guess, have the microphone and I have to listen to them because I bought this ticket. But yeah, no, for sure. Like I think like something that like most comedians can totally start with is just like personal stuff. Like go up there and talk about like your family or like your background or then like that's how like I really do stand by talking about like my Asian American experience, because even though I think like a lot of people are like, ooh, race jokes, like that's so easy, but like honestly, like if you want to talk about something, like you should probably talk about it, especially if it's pertaining to like your personal experience, and then therefore it's probably going to be unique to you, so probably something that hasn't been done before, because I think it can be hard to go up there and be like, oh hey, aren't like street lights strange, because like everybody knows street lights, so like essentially like, or like I don't know, that's a weird example. I don't know, like you're like, oh, isn't like something generic something, and
Books.
like, but yeah, books, why not? Books are weird, blah 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 blah, but like chances are maybe somebody made that observation because everyone kind of knows that very objective item, but like that's why I think personal things are so valuable, just because like people want to hear about like unique experiences, I think, on top of wanting to laugh, of course, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you can find something funny about personal experience.
Interesting.
So yeah, so I think that's huge. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
especially in starting out.
Most comedians. So if I ever see a comedian, they'll probably have like some kind of notebook like handy with them, ready to write down
Totally.
jokes.
Oh yeah, I would definitely like either that or something in their phone where they're like texting themselves jokes.
Is that like, I guess, how to be more funny? Because like you weren't a class clown, but there seems like to be a system where you can develop jokes and like practice and being more funnier. Is that like a true thing, or is it like you're born funny?
Oh yeah, no, you can totally. I mean, I think it's a muscle. Like I think it's probably a
It's a
skill,
muscle. Wow.
a muscle, right? I don't know. I mean,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I think
Yeah, yeah,
it's
go
not
on. Go on.
like maybe some people like just don't have the bone in them, and I don't know. But I haven't come across someone like that. I think that like I think a telltale sign of like you can be funny is if you laugh at things. Like like if you're already interested in comedy because it makes you laugh, like you're probably have a sense of humor, so you can probably produce something that'll make you laugh and therefore make other people laugh. So yeah, I mean, I think like ways to like kind of work on that is just like watching a lot of stand-up comedy, and like kind of like seeing how styles are and what makes people laugh. Obviously, what makes you laugh, that's super important. And then
Yeah.
being able to kind of like workshop things that you like come up with, right? So it's like if you do have a premise that you wrote down in your notebook or that you texted to yourself or whatever, like then you can like expand on it by just like kind of sitting down, and maybe like I really find it useful to literally just like talk to myself in my room, which is probably weird for a lot of my roommates. But, like just like starting out and like talking, and then hopefully you can kind of like get on a track where it's like, wow, like what I just said was actually funny, or you can go on a tangent and it's not funny, but like whatever, no one's listening, right? So you can workshop stuff. I mean, if there's like any like friends that are funny, like that you love talking to, just to like riff off of each other, like I think that's just a great place to like figure
Yeah.
out like what's funny, what makes other people laugh. Like I'm sure like comedians, if you know any like comedians, are probably trying out jokes on their friends all the time without them even knowing.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, sometimes I would say like sometimes if like we get on a topic that's like kind of close to a premise I'm trying out, I'll like try to slip it in there and see what the reaction is. Like it's totally like a social experiment, which is probably immoral, but like I think it's just yeah, I think it's just funny because it is kind of just it's a thing you can workshop really, and I don't think like, anyone totally
Well,
doesn't have the gene in them.
yeah. Well, so yeah, when you were first starting out, you
Mhm.
said that you were doing comedy kind of alone, like you were by yourself on the sidewalk, for example. You
Yeah.
pulled yourself in. I guess, how did you personally get feedback on your jokes? And I mean, did you have any friends or mentors or coaches
I
that?
see it. I mean, like when I come to school, I have a lot of people I can like run stuff by, just because there's a lot of comedy interested students, like the
Oh.
stand up group that I told you about.
Mhm.
I'm in like the Harvard Lampoon, which is more like of a written like humor organization, which is it's a like a humor magazine primarily, but like a lot of comedy interested students in that. So it's already great to like have that sort of. But obviously, like when I graduate, I'm gonna be sad and alone.
Don't say
Yeah.
that.
But like I think no, I think like even when you're working there as a stand-up comedian, like where you really workshop your jokes, honestly, is like on stage at open mic. So that's why people have to go to open mic so often. I mean, you can test it out on like your roommate or your friend or like other comedians. Totally, that's valid. But yeah, I mean, the ultimate like help is open mics, and like those are actually never really like you never really prepare for them like performances. I mean, you do, but in the sense that like you're workshopping stuff typically, so you can hopefully go to a bunch of open mics and try out like 5 new jokes, and maybe like 4 of them will bomb, but maybe out of them like a little gem and like one that like, oh, they kind of laughed at that, and I'm going to tweak it a little bit and hopefully it'll be good enough for like an actual show. So that's kind of like if you're alone, like you're not really alone because you're going to open mics and you're trying stuff out on like an audience, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be called a coward, but sometimes like if I'm on stage and I've done this before where I'm doing like a regular public speech, not like a comedy thing, but just a regular public speech, and I wrote a joke in there, and it completely falls flat. It, like no one laughs, no one blinks an eye.
No worries.
Like when you do that with open mics, like does that ever like deter you or like discourage you? Like
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does, but like that's why you got to keep doing it, I think, because it becomes so much less significant every time it happens.
I see.
You become numb to that. No, just kidding. But yeah, in a way, too, because I think it's just like you go to an open mic, oh, you bomb your first time ever you ever bombed, and it's just like terrifying and soul destroying. But then you go home and you're like, I'm still alive, and like no one beat me up after the show, so that's great. Yeah, it's definitely like not a problem at all. I think like people bomb all the time. Every comedian has bombed. Every famous comedian has bombed too. So like that's huge. That's so important to know. I think, yeah, and then as you do it more and more, like it's becomes less significant.
Well, cool. Well, I'm a big believer in like the 80-20 rule, where 20% of your efforts lead to 80% of your results. And relating to comedy, I guess what are some of your personal like 20% of your efforts that resulted in like the biggest like growth, like personally or professionally?
I'm not actually familiar with that. What does that mean exactly? Is it like
so like 80-20 rule, like 20% of like your marketing efforts result in 80% of your results. So 20% of the books you read are
what 80, like is accounted or like what's responsible for a bunch of your
my results, or like 20% of your closet is what you wear 80% of the time.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's true too for me. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like I guess certain little events that have happened that kind of led to other things. Is that what you mean, or like?
Yeah, I guess the main question is what, like if you there's like the 10 things you should do as a comedian to practice. But I guess what are some of the most important things that any new comedians or anyone trying to be more funnier, like in general, to like focus on this journey to be like more funnier, I guess.
Yeah, to get the funnies. I think just really like all the I don't know. I mean, because a lot of it is just performing, and like that can honestly be like considered 20% of my effort, because I think a lot of the effort is also just going into like trying to figure out where to go and like to perform and find the good places to perform. You know what I mean? Because like there can be like places where you're like, I'm never going back there again because I was dumb. Well, so there's a little bit of that, I think. Yeah, and then also just like kind of trying to do things, trying to like talk about things that are hopefully like rewarding to yourself, so that way you can like, because I think like every joke or whatever I've written that I like didn't value in some way, like I said, like the first one that I ever wrote where it was like a lie and like I just made it up because I thought people would laugh at it. Like I think it's just so much more rewarding to yourself, and also just like rewarding experience, and then the audience can tell that you are actually like in it, is to like focus on topics that actually like mean something to you, or that like are specific to sort of like your experience. And I think that can really like take you further as a comedian, because you'll be able to like really deliver it.
Personal stories.
I guess so. I don't know. I mean, but not to be restricted to that. Everybody has different styles, and it's still personal though. Even if someone's talking about something that is objective or different or like separate from themselves, like it can still be personal if it's a thought that they came up with that they really like stand behind,
Well, another question popped into my mind when you said that the other story you told was a lie. Like, is it common for most comedians to like not tell true stories? I thought they're just exaggerations of.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, I still have a lot of lie jokes. But I mean, I think that's the difference, is like, it's not so much the lie thing that's a problem. It's just like, I think I just wrote it because I was like, I think that someone else will find this funny. Versus like, you want to make sure you write stuff that you find is funny too, because then it'll like show through and you'll be able to actually make it funny for the audience. Because so I think that's kind of the main thing, versus like, but I mean, like I still tell a bunch of lies in my jokes just for like comedic effect and like whatever, like it works for the joke. And like all sorts of comedians, I'm sure, like exaggerate and lie and all the time, and it's just like part of the art.
Okay, so that's normal, right? It's not like
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
cool.
no, yeah, for sure, it's normal.
Well, awesome. I want to start wrapping this up, but I just want to ask, like, being, through your 4 years of comedy so far, like, has, like, I'm always thinking about, like, the drunk hecklers or, like, embarrassing first performances. Like, was there anything that stuck out to you throughout your journey that you want to, like, share that maybe we can learn from? Like, anything that you had, any situation where you had to, like, come back with a good comeback or anything, like, significant that pops out to you when you look back on your journey?
Totally like weird occurrences at shows. I would say one time I kind of got really flustered before I went up, and it affected my show. So like this one host and like MC, they kind of introduce you like I was kind of in this point. So like I did Last Comic Standing this past season, and it was a great experience. And I was like definitely like the youngest one there. It was a little bit scary. I was like definitely, there's all these things with like kind of discontinuities between like television and stand up, where it is kind of interesting. And I could talk on that all day, so I don't want to speak on it too much, but it is kind of like interesting. Like I was so honored to be on, but there were so many comedians that were like so much more experienced, and like honestly, like I just got very lucky that I could be there, because I think like there are a lot of people who like could have done what I did on there, but like, I'm not saying that I didn't like also like hold my own there. I think it's just like, luck is involved at a certain point, right? Because there's just so many comedians and like so many people that are totally television ready and could totally do their set on television. So anyway, so I was a little bit self-conscious about that, just because I know like, I know how people would react if it's like, oh, you haven't been, or like you're kind of young and like what,
you don't deserve this.
Exactly. So I kind of was a little self-conscious about that. So then I think one time I went on a show, and I was like, just part of my credits. And normally when they called the comedian, it's like, this next comedian you might have seen on like the Tonight Show or whatever, right? So for me, I was like, oh, Last Comic Standing, and that's primarily it. So then the host kind of called up me and then sort of talked about Last Comic Standing, and then he sort of went into this whole thing about how like the comedians on Last Comic Standing aren't really, or like are only there because like of what like the agents and managers chose or something weird like that, which is like kind of like immediately like I was like, he like clearly thinks I don't really deserve to be on it or whatever. I don't have an agent or manager, so I was like, definitely kind of confused there, and like wanted to communicate that, but like didn't really know how, right? So then I get up there and I'm just like already completely flustered. I like couldn't unwrap the mic from the stand. I was like already kind of like confused what to do, because I was just like so out of the zone. And so unfortunately, like I think it probably affected the rest of my set. And it wasn't like terrible, but it was definitely like way more, it just like set the tone kind of awkwardly. So I think the main thing that take away, so that's kind of like my most recent like, oh shucks experience, right? Was like, I think like, first of all, like the MCs shouldn't do that. I mean, they should be like completely supportive because they're supposed to bring the energy up and like not set up anyone for failure, right? But I think the main thing is just like for comedians, like you just really have to be confident, I think, and like especially on stage, because the audience feels like it's such a like sympathetic thing, right? So, or an empathetic thing, I guess. So like when the audience is watching someone like nervous or shaking or like stuttering, it can be like, if handled wrong, like it can be a kind of damper on the audience. And even if your joke is really funny, like they probably won't laugh because they're already feeling a little bit awkward,
because you're awkward, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, they really feel for you because you're like on stage, and sometimes they're already nervous to begin with, no matter how nervous you are, because they know if they were in that position they would be nervous, right? So so I think just like, and in anything too, it's like just like be confident and show confidence in that sort of thing. And then like, who knows? I mean, like, even if you're not, I'm never really, but it's like fake it till you make it,
Wait,
so maybe that's my takeaway.
you're not confident when you go up?
Oh, I mean, like, no, I think sometimes, but for the most part, yeah, I'm not. I think it's like a side effect of always kind of going up and being one of the younger ones and being like, I don't really know anyone, but yeah, it's not necessarily like, I don't think about it anymore, because you just gotta show that you're there and you are meant to be there. So
Yeah, I feel like if you've done it so many times, like stage time,
Mhm.
it's just like kind of like what you said earlier, like jokes falling flat. It just you just
Right.
becomes numb to it.
Oh, totally. I mean, like, yeah, I'm never like nervous or stage fright or like, luckily anymore because it's just, I mean, depending on the circumstance, sure, if it's like you're
Like
performing in a big arena, then like you're gonna be probably shitting your pants. But like if you're in a club, like hopefully you're comfortable there after having done it for a while. And I think, it does only get better, like confidence and stage fright wise. But like it is important to like, no matter what happens in, maybe the MC is not being super supportive or the audience, something happened to the audience, or you had a fight with your girlfriend or boyfriend on the phone, so whatever happens, like you just kind of have to leave it off the stage and and like project that you're supposed to be there and you're fine and you're just trying to make people laugh.
be honest. Were you confident going on to NBC's Last Comic Standing?
I was like, oh gosh, no, freaking out. I mean, like for one, like I said, I used to watch that. I watched it from like season 1, and so it was like a huge, crazy thing that I even got to be on it. But at the actual performance, like backstage, luckily they didn't air that footage, but they're like filming of all of us backstage, like, oh, are you nervous? Like, what are you doing right now? And I was like hiccuping and burping and stuff. Really terrifying. But generally, like once you get on there, like it's like every other show, I mean, like you just really like the audience just was great. So like that really helped. And like you just I tried to ignore like the 3 judges panel, and they were like right in front of you. They also had like a huge like countdown clock because we had 3.5 minutes, and when it hit like a minute, it's like a minute, and then like at 30 seconds started counting down 30, 29, 20. Yeah, so that was like terrifying. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely like if you love stand-up comedy, I just feel like every show ends up being kind of similar and like similarly great, I guess, in the sense that like you enjoy yourself, it won't be totally terrifying, hopefully.
Dang. Well, Sierra, this has been so awesome. I felt like I learned a lot, like personally, just from your experience. And
yeah, are you gonna go try some open mics now?
I I have to now. Yeah, I have to make a decent 20-second joke first, and then
and then expand it to 3 minutes.
and expanded 3 minutes.
Adding on.
And then 4 of my jokes will fall flat, and then 1 will pull through.
Oh, well, you never know. Maybe all 5 of them will be huge.
Maybe. Well, Sierra, the audience listening, where can they find more about you and what you're up to?
Oh, yeah. So I guess probably the best thing is I'm on Twitter. It's at Sierra Katow, which is SIERRAKATOW. That's my name. And then I have a website, same name.com. So sierrakatow.com.
Same name.com.
Right. That's someone else's. I don't know who that is. And yeah, so I guess those 2 things. I post show dates on sierrakatow.com, but when I'm at school, I don't do much outside of Boston area. But then hopefully I'll be back in LA, for a little bit in the winter, and then at the end after I graduate in May.
Cool.
So yeah.
Well, when I'm in LA, I'll be sure to or message you, and
yeah.
I want to come to your show and see what you're all about.
Yeah, I'll come to your show too.
Oh my.
Fast forward. No, just kidding, but yeah, no, sure. Like we'll hit up some open mics together or something.
That'll be fun, actually. Sierra, this has been great. Thanks so much for your time, and I really appreciate this.
Sweet, thank you.
All right, peace out, Sierra.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to Outside of the Classroom. Go ahead and go to www.outsideoftheclassroom.com/podcast to see all of the show notes and resources we talked about today. And feel free to reach out to me for any feedback on the podcast, any guests you want to recommend, or if you need any help in general. I'm here for you. Let's kick ass in life together. All right, now stay awesome.